welcome everyone. My name is Eloisa. I'm part of the OneFuture Coachella Valley team, and I want to welcome you all to our third session of our Mental Health Matters webinar series. This is the third of 6 sessions that we have developed for this series, so we're halfway through. Our speakers for today are Jazmin Rojas, who has been presenting in the previous sessions and will present the future presentations as well. Jason.tate and Fausto Figueroa are going to be our career panelists for today. So I'm excited to have them present to you all and for you to learn from their experiences. So thank you for joining us, and I'll go ahead and pass it on to Jazmin, who will present today's topic on testing anxiety and stress management.
So for today, we're going to be talking about testing anxiety and stress management. And so I'm very passionate about this topic because, as students achieving higher education, test anxiety is real. Once you start figuring out that these exam scores are really impacting your grade, and let's just say this class only gets offered once a year, and so it's really important to pass this class, so you feel this kind of pressure, right? So for today, the goal is to gain a lot of skills on how we can start taking tests effectively and also manage the stress that we experience, because stress is normal. Stress is not abnormal. There's good stress, there's bad stress. The key to it is learning how to manage it. Okay, so who am I? For those who have seen me, once again, for those who are new, my name is Jazmin Rojas, pronouns she, they. I am currently a 4th year at UCI. I am studying psychological and biological sciences. So before we get started, quick disclaimer that the information offered here is not therapy. If any of this information resembles to you and just need some further help, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be more than happy to guide you to some assistance, to some resources that the Valley can definitely provide for you. Also, another thing, the type of anxiety we will be describing today is testing anxiety. Testing anxiety kind of varies from generalized anxiety disorder that is usually typically diagnosed and through a therapist. So community agreements, once again, before we get started, this is your safe space where we respect opinions, thoughts, and feelings. Also in this space, we are actively listening by being present. And also what is shared here stays here. What is learned here leaves here, AKA the Vegas rule. That's one of my favorite rules whenever we're talking about specific information. And lastly, one mic, one Beyonce. So what does that mean? That means when somebody is talking or muting themselves, which we heavily encourage, the floor is yours. So just understand, the floor is yours, your opinions and thoughts and feelings are respected. And we're here as a community to listen actively. So for today, we're going to be defining test anxiety and its symptoms. A couple questions like, what does it mean whenever I'm experiencing certain things? Also, how to manage testing anxiety, knowing how to recognize these factors and these feelings in yourself, and learning how to manage it, right? And so lastly, what is stress and how do we manage it? So how can we reduce or minimize the experience of negative feelings? So once we get started, I want to start off with a Benjamin Spock quote where he says, "Trust yourself, you know more than you do." And so that's basically one of the main roots of the testing anxiety, where we're afraid of the unknown, right? And so essentially, if you studied, you've attended your courses, you've done what you need to do. So just trust yourself, trust the process, that you're smart enough to complete the test, one question at a time. So testing anxiety, it's a psychological condition in which people experience distress and anxiety in testing situations. Many experience some degree of stress and testing anxiety before, during, and after exams. It can really impair your learning and hinder your test performance. So for folks who can get 100% on their practice test when they're at home, once they're in a lecture hall, or let's just say the DMV, for example, it goes blank. So these testing anxieties don't necessarily have to stick to academic, but also for folks who need to get their driver's license, right? For folks who, let's just say you work fast food and you need to take those, you need like a certificate. I've done it before. And so it's pretty nervous. It's pretty, nerve-wracking whenever you're not experienced, you're not really exposed to taking exams. And the outgo really depends on the future, right? So psychological effects of stress, you usually feel anger, fear, helplessness, disappointment, like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with this exam. Like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to fail. And you start worrying. It's just a spiral of worrying, right? And physiological effects, headaches. For me, I tend to clench my jaw a lot. Another thing, for example, I don't really feel tension in my shoulders until I lift all the way up. And this is something I encourage you to do. Lift your shoulders all the way up. And once you drop them, you really feel the relief of tension on your shoulders. And you're like, you know what? My body's tensing up. That's telling me something, right? So then it's up to you to really evaluate your surroundings. Recognizing symptoms. So are you able to recognize when you or a friend is feeling anxious? As mentioned in the chat, the tapping of your knee, the tapping of your pencil, biting your nails, it's showing anxiety, right? And so especially in a stressful environment, if you see particular behaviorism such as those mentioned, then you should be able to recognize that something is going on. Okay, so implementing various strategies for managing test anxiety. So physical strategies, sleep. Sleep is super important. Sleep is super, super, super important. For folks who have any knowledge on psychology, there is something called consolidation. So if you study, take a good night's rest, eat breakfast in the morning. Consolidation usually happens when you're asleep. So if you study, effectively study, and you sleep, you wake up, your brain is doing its thing for you. In the morning, you'll be prepared to take that exam because everything that you studied the night before is just kind of solidified in your short-term memory. Eating is really important. It's kind of embarrassing in a silent lecture hall, or just if you're taking an exam on your own and you hear your stomach rumbling, your body can't really necessarily focus all of its energy and efforts into taking that exam. Stretching and being active. A lot of folks like to work out as a means of, de-stress and also anxiety. And so taking breaks, most importantly, burnout can really happen if you just study on a 4-hour block, right? There's I forgot the name of it, but studying in blocks. So studying for 25 minutes, resting for 10 or resting for 5, and just continuously doing that cycle. I like to do that. I actually like to set a 30-minute timer. Once that 30 minutes goes up, then I take a 10-minute break or a walk. And it really helps me study, as well as breathing. Taking deep breaths helps you relax, calms down your nervous system, kind of, releases that tension, slow down your heart rate, and helps with your blood pressure. So cognitive strategies, imposter syndrome. If anyone has ever heard of imposter syndrome is the belief that you are not, fit in the situation that you are in, right? So for me, I am a first generation identifying female college student. Sometimes I go to UCI, I'm like, I do not belong here. People do not look like me. People are, way above me. But then I'm like, you know what? No, I've worked very hard for this. I've had lots of support, and just being kind to yourself really helps with anxiety, especially when it comes to testing anxiety, that you don't think what you're doing is enough, right? And also support for cognitive strategies, I really suggest you to do a little bit of research on your campus and investigate if they have a student disability center. So something really cool at UCI is if you suffer from testing anxiety and you get a proper diagnosis from their center, they will actually allocate extra time for you to take an exam. And also, let's just say if it's the lecture hall that puts you in an anxious state, they'll actually let you take an exam in a secluded room by yourself, obviously being monitored, but not to the extent where you have like 300 or 400 people right next to you, right? And also hobbies, just reminding yourself that you are a lot more than academics. Some people are musicians, some people are athletes, and some people are artists, right? Not just strictly students. So by pausing from what you're doing, it can also help, as well as tutoring others. If you're able to explain whatever you're studying in an effective manner, that means you really got a grasp on things, right? So if you can also approach the test in that same way, really explain it if it was up to someone else. So what is stress? Another quote from Han Seil: non-specific response of the body to any demand made on it. So stress just doesn't come out of nowhere. It's always something is being required from us that where we're no longer interpreting as we're able to do that. So something is coming in, they're asking, and I can't do it. So then my body starts freaking out, right? So that's how the eliciting event is a stressor. So let's just say someone is calling me asking for $10,000. I have $5 on me right now. I am gonna panic because I'm being requested $10,000. My subjective evaluation says I don't have that ability. I cannot give you $10,000. I am a student, right? So at that point, I can either panic or I can, maybe look for support. Hey, I really need $10,000. And if I know those people are willing to give me that support, my reaction to the stress will calm down. Or if I know I absolutely have nowhere to get that money, I'll freak out, you start shaking, you start maybe getting nauseous, getting a headache, right? So those are the characteristics of stress. Something is demanded on you. Your own evaluation of the situation, whether you are able to meet those demands or you aren't able to meet those demands, will really trigger your response. If you are able to meet them, then the day goes on, right? If you aren't able to meet them, then that's when we start panicking. So there's three categories when it comes to symptoms of stress: psychological, physiological, and behavioral. Psychological is like mood changes. Do you ever come home from a stressful day and your dog is on you, your pet's on you, and you just get mad and you just kind of put your stress on them, right? Those are the slight mood changes. Lack of motivation. Too much stress is like, I have too much on my to-do list. I don't even know where I'm going to start, so I'm just not going to start. That's how it can potentially look like. And also restlessness, where you just get a sudden burst of energy and you need to do X, Y, and Z at the same time, and it's just a bunch of chaos. Physiological stress actually really weakens your immune system. That's why a lot of people with a lot of stressors, like folks in really, really, really low areas of socioeconomic status, suffer a lot from illness because of these symptoms of stress. Headaches, muscle tension as well. Once again, raise your shoulders up to your ears and then just drop them. And you really feel the release of muscle tension. And also fatigue. Sometimes stress can really tire folks out, and you just get sleepy or you just don't sleep enough. For behavioral, overeating or undereating. Have y'all heard of stress eating? Things of that nature, or undereating. Sometimes I get so busy, I forget to eat. And I'm like, that's not healthy. You know what I mean? If I am not healthy, then I can't continue to fulfill the demands that are being met on me. And also drug and alcohol misuse. It's really important where folks are just like, I'm gonna drink 1 cup of wine for the stress, and then that 1 cup turns into 2, and 2 turns into 3, and it's just a downward spiral, because folks are really trying to escape the symptoms of stress. So as I mentioned earlier, not all stress is bad stress. So there's 2 types of stressors. Eustress, which is good. Buying a home, getting married, going on a date, butterflies. That's good stress. It's really a game of balance, because if there's no stress, then you have no motivations, right? But if you have too much stress, and that's just bad for you. Like distress, the death of a family member, also the loss of a job, abuse. So think about it as a normal curve, like a big hill, right? You have no stress, you're at 0. If you are at the very top, it's a good amount of stress where you just get enough done, but it's not too much stress on you. And also at the other end of the hill, like it's just too much stress, you just explode. It's not good for you. It's too much on your body, it's too much on your mind, and you just can't meet the demands that are being met from you. So lastly, ways to manage stress, navigate, and balance to life's pressures and challenges. So stress management is not a one-size-fits-all, such as what Wayne Dyer has said. You can't always control what goes on outside, but you can always control what goes on in the inside. And so what de-stressing might look like to you does not look like to me. I am a very arts and crafts person, so that really de-stresses me out. That helps me with stress, while some folks really, really like to work out. So once again, ways to manage stress during a really stressful event in the moment, right? So taking a couple of breaths, separating yourself, let me get a moment to think, organize my thoughts, and also understanding the situation. My favorite practice to do in a moment of stress is the 4 A's. So either avoid it, alter it, adapt to it, or accept it. As mentioned in that quote, not all the things that bring us stressors we can't control. So in that situation, you either have the option to avoid it or accept it. And you can also adapt to it, right? So there's situations where I have an exam and I say, okay, so for this block of time, I'm only going to focus on, my bio portion of the exam. And so for the second part, I'm only going to focus on the psych part of my exam, rather than just think of the exam as a whole. And that's where altering and adapting really comes into play. And also reaching out for others and confiding in others is really helpful. And that's where we just basically go back into our first presentation of communication and conflict resolution. And let's just say someone's really blowing up your phone because they want to hang out, and that's stressing you out because you also have to study for an exam. That's where you can connect and say, hey, right now I appreciate you reaching out, but I have an exam. Or that can also be really helpful and beneficial in regards to taking a break from what you're doing, venting out from the folks who just invited you out, and you just have a break and you have a moment to decompress, right? So it's really important to just pause for a moment, evaluate the situation, and think of the things you actually have control over. So how can I prevent extra stressors? Start a stress journal. I actually really love writing because sometimes it's just I have so much going on, and it isn't until you start speaking out loud where you're like, you know what, I just think it's kind of in my head. This is totally feasible. And so it's just putting thoughts down on paper, visualizing it, and you can actually see your stress on paper. Balance. Life is really a game of balance. You can't have too much nor too little of everything, right? Or else it's just unbalanced. And so that kind of just brings stress, extra stress. If you play too much, too many games, you don't have enough time to do your homework. If you do have too much homework, you don't really have time to do things that you really like. Time management. Time management is my best friend. As ridiculous as it sounds, I usually plan everything on a calendar. And if that can help you, by all means, practice it. It's really a game of trial and error. And also making time for fun. As I mentioned before, we're so much more than students. We're so much more than our professional careers. We are also individuals with likes and dislikes, hobbies and passions that really just ground us and remind us of why we navigate the way we do through our everyday life. And lastly, please acknowledge and remind yourself that this is hard. Life is difficult. Being a student is difficult. If it was really easy, everybody would do it. And so we really have to learn to let go of what we can't change and do the best with what we can. It is totally okay to feel stressed, and it is even more acceptable to experience it, especially in our circumstances right now. We can't really expect ourselves to be perfect in a pandemic, right? And so if you can take anything away from this, it is okay to not be okay. So thank you very much.
I think my journey within mental health really started after college. During college, we go through this normalization of stress and anxiety and depression. So it's cool, to be stressed and have an overload amount of work that you need to be doing. And so there got to a certain point where there were some times where I was just feeling a certain way in college, and truthfully, I didn't know that I was going through some things. Because like I said, I think we reached a point where it's just normal. And so I came across this concept called self-awareness, and I was like, what is self-awareness? What does that mean? I have control over my actions. My thoughts can just come and go. And so I was really intrigued because, like I said, going through some things, learning about that concept made me realize, like, wow, maybe I should take a step back and assess and reflect, some of the ways that I've been feeling throughout the years. And so that in itself made me just go on this whole journey, which brings me here today. And I'm just grateful for the space and for seeing so many beautiful and familiar faces. So, I got into that. And I think from there, I just realized, well, wow, I might have actually been experiencing a lot of emotions and feelings. I know at one point in my college career, I went through a phase of severe depression. And I didn't realize it was severe depression until I was seeing my therapist almost 2 years later. So really, at this point, I'm currently a peer crisis counselor for Visión y Compromiso. There's at a federal level, they're trying to implement a hotline where people can reach out, whether they're feeling anxious, stressed. And so when I get that information or that hotline, I'll go ahead and share it here. So if any of you all, are feeling a certain way or looking for support, we can go ahead and provide that guidance. But I'm doing that, and I'm also a barista at a coffee shop at 6th Street Coffee. If y'all haven't heard of it, if y'all like coffee, I'll be waiting for you here. But I really enjoy it because I think I share with people. Sometimes I feel like a therapist. Like, you ask people how they're feeling, how they are, how their day is. And sometimes people just feel a lot and they just open up to you and, share so much. And to be in a place of that kind of trust, it's just, I think it's beautiful because then you can just get some insight on how the other person is feeling. But I'm currently, in the process of also building my own personal brand and starting a podcast called Latinx Mindfulness, and just surrounding the idea of mindfulness around mental health. Because I think I reached a certain point where I just realized it's important to just be mindful of our emotions, of our thoughts, And then mindfulness seeps into other parts of our relationships, our lives, whereas we can be mindful with our partner, we can be mindful with our family, we can be mindful with our coworkers. So really trying to bring awareness to that within the Latina community and the Coachella Valley. And I'm right now, personally, and being truthfully honest, I'm giving myself 5 years to do a master's program. When and if I do it, it'll probably be in becoming a therapist or a psychologist. But I mean, that's pretty much a brief overview of kind of my introduction to mental health, the field, and just kind of what I'm doing in it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out or ask, but appreciate y'all.
I'm a teacher. I'm in my 16th year at Indio High School. I started off as a biologist from Northern Arizona University and was teaching biology at Indio High School, morphed into kind of a nutrition, education, wellness teacher. And I was experiencing some mental health issues, and it really woke up for me with the loss of my mother about 6 years ago. Due to cardiovascular disease, which there was an underlying mental illness there as well. I learned a lot from that experience, growing through that experience, and built the HANS Health and Nutritional Sciences Academy at Indio High School in response to that, around 3 pillars of wellness: movement, nutrition, and mindfulness or mental health. I teach nutrition, I teach yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, I teach breathing techniques and meditation, and became a functional medicine certified health coach in the process of learning how to become a 21st century healer. So all of these things came together. I do have a podcast that I did at my own international radio show for a year. And there's a lot of podcasts out there. If you just look up Tate Talks, there's a lot of great information there as well, and a lot of meditations that I share. And I'm actually also building a YouTube channel called The Mindful Scientist, where I bring in the science of mindfulness and then practical techniques as well. So just kind of, there's a great community here with OneFuture and Jazmin and Fausto, and just, you know, we're all innate healers. I believe that we all have this innate ability to heal those around us, and it all comes from love. And so there's a saying that, you know, we make choices in our life out of 2 reasons: based out of love or based out of fear. And so where are you choosing? Where is your choice? As a teacher, I have to become an inspirational voice for my students on a regular basis. And I do get to hear some challenging stories about, you know, from my students, but I feel like I also have to be a motivational speaker every day to be able to get them to, come on, do your work, you know, get your schoolwork done. Let's do this. Let's pass. And, you know, it becomes exhausting, but at the same time, as a teacher for my students, I have to constantly maintain positivity and focus on gratitude and forgiveness. And so I have a saying that I'll leave you with. I've been saying this for a few years now, that gratitude and forgiveness are our Sherpas on the mountain of mental health. And they really are. And a Sherpa is a guide, somebody who can take you to the top of a mountain, who's done it many times. And gratitude and forgiveness are these Sherpas. So whatever you're feeling like the odds are stacked against you, focus on gratitude. What can you be grateful for? And then also focus on forgiveness, forgiving others, but also finding the strength to forgive yourself. So that's what I'll leave you with in my 3 minutes. Hopefully I stuck within that time. And thank you everyone for being here.